All right. B, welcome to the show. Is this my first time having you on my show?
It might be. I'm not sure. I can't remember. We've talked a lot, but
Like,
I
I
think this
don't think
is
I've
the
ever had
first
you on
time.
solo. Yeah, I don't think I've
Yeah,
ever had you on one-on-one.
yeah. I think this is the first time. So cool.
I think this is actually going to make a good first episode. Her introduction to Pete, the guy who changes his mind with new information, and
Oh
because I
no,
think
no, no, no. I'm completely
you just flip flop.
incoherent in my ideology, and I don't. I don't need new information. I just need to switch around, and I enjoy alienating people so much and losing money that I just do it on purpose.
I mean, that's your thing is that you're here to help them save money. Wealth, power, and influence, right? Just in reverse.
I'll tell you,
Like you,
Mark's episode that he put out
Mhm.
was so good.
Oh my god.
I mean, his points were just so good, and I know that the people who automatically, think that the LP is like somehow this is going to give them legitimacy, or I don't know, maybe
They'll
meaning in
stop being
life.
poor losers who live with their
Um,
parents.
I know that they didn't hear what Mark had to say, but I mean, Mark just fucking nailed it when he said, I'm losing money doing this. I'm losing downloads doing this. What kind of, you know, what do you think? What do you think I'm gaining from this? No.
Yeah, like
Uh,
seriously. There's nothing in it here, and like even for me, it's like this is so much more stress. I have a very nice, nice paying job, and it's like I do not need the money. It's like I don't want to quit my job. Well, I want to get a better job and actually get paid more money because I feel like I'm being underpaid. But like this politics thing never going to pay me, and like I'm doing this because I feel like I have to. And so and I know Mark and you are basically in the same boat where you're like, we got to make some changes here. And because it's like we recognize the enemy. And this is way more serious than we ever thought it was. And yeah, we're gonna talk about that a little bit today. But it's like if you live through the last 2.5 years and you didn't change your ideology at all, you are either like top fraction of 1% in terms of you were based about literally everything, or you're just like an idiot who doesn't change his mind with new information.
well, I mean, I don't mind if
Yeah.
somebody holds on to the libertarian ideology as an ideal, but the ones
Yeah.
who hold on to it and like aren't willing to offer any kind of practical solutions or entertain practical solutions because their ideology has become their actual identity, and
Yeah.
they're scared that the in group is going to attack them like it's attacked me. um yeah, I just find a new group. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that simple.
I think we're going to get into like why that's easy for some people and not for others.
Right.
And we're going to put that we're going to put that together here. But I want to start off with like tell us about because a lot of people they don't quite know this about you, but you were and actually raised in a very like religious family, Catholic, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I don't know if you would call us religious. I mean, I was baptized as a baby Catholic.
Mhm.
um I had my first communion. I graduated Catholic high school. I went to a Jesuit high school for a year and a half before I switched over to Catholic school. That was interesting. That a friend of mine asked me to said that when I see her next week, she's going to ask questions about my time in a Jesuit in one of
Oh
the
boy.
premier Jesuit high schools in New York. What's funny is I tell people I went to Jesuit high school in New York, and if they're at all familiar with New York and Jesuits, they know exactly what high school I went to. I,
Really?
I was I was talking to a guy, Mark McGrath, not the lead singer for
Uh-huh.
Sugar Ray, and he goes, I said, yeah, I went to a Jesuit high school in New York, and he goes, you went to Fordham Prep, and I'm like, yeah, I did. I went to Fordham Prep for a year and a half. Yeah,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yeah. So that was an interesting experience. And then I switched out and I went to just a normal Catholic school, which You want to hear a funny story about that one?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I went to St. Agnes High School, which
Okay.
was on 44th Street in Manhattan, between 3rd and Lexington. So it's on 44th, but if you go over to 43rd Street, there's a church backs up to it. So you can actually walk through the high school and get to the church, and vice versa. So you can go from 44th to 43rd Street. So one of the first times I hung out with Tom Woods, I mentioned, we were talking about his conversion to Catholicism and everything. And um, guess what church?
Really, right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that where
Right
he was
across the street
converted?
from the Chrysler building. I'm pretty sure we had been drinking, we drank a lot at that lunch. But if I remember correctly, I think
Mhm.
that is the church where he converted. So, and then
Ah,
what's funny is my friend Mark McGrath, when I was talking to him, he's like, "Oh yeah, I know St. Agnes." So, they the reason a lot of people know St. Agnes is because they have a Latin mass,
oh, okay.
and like a
Yeah.
real Latin mass. It isn't just the
Mhm.
normal. It isn't the normal mass spoken in Latin.
Yeah.
So it's a real, yeah.
A real song. It's actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so that's a beautiful kind of mass. That's the kind I go to. At least once a month. And but yeah, so it's like, but so your family wasn't quite Catholic, but you were basically raised by Jesuits who have a real reputation for being secular bastards. And
Well,
yet,
my mom was a hardcore Catholic. Okay,
okay.
and she came from a Russian Orthodox. Her family
Oh,
was
okay.
Russian
Real hardcore.
Orthodox, and she crossed over to she became a Catholic.
Hmm.
Her mom never became a Catholic, but
Yeah.
she decided to go with Catholicism.
That
And
bastard Pope. Yeah.
yeah, and and yeah, so I mean, my dad was raised in a Pentecostal church,
Okay.
and yeah, so nothing was pushed upon me. I mean, when I was young, but it's like
Mhm.
I was ready
Of
to
course.
do my confirmation, and I discovered weed, and that pretty much like detoured a lot. Yeah. So yeah. So like if
Okay.
I went back to church now, I'd have to do what is it?
Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been 40 years.
Well, what do they call it? What is it? RCIA? What is it?
RCIA, yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm sure they really. I mean, didn't you do? If you weren't confirmed though, so you never really got
I
confirmed.
never got confirmed. No.
Really, that's interesting. But so you didn't get confirmed, but then like later in life after high school, like you went to seminary for a little while, right?
Well, I mean but I didn't go to a Catholic seminary.
Oh, that explains it.
Yeah, I
Okay,
went to a Presbyterian Church of America, PCA seminary,
that explains it.
and I spent a
And
lot. I spent most of my time in the library. I skipped a lot of classes and just stayed. It was an amazing library, and all I did was
oh
basically
wow.
spend a lot of time. And the first couple days, the first few classes,
Mhm.
scare the crap out of you because you never hear this stuff sitting in the pews.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
don't. And I actually want to dive into that just a little bit because here I was thinking like you were secularized by the Jesuits, and now I'm like, oh, thank God it was the Protestants that did it. And but yeah, it's like I've actually heard that a lot, about like seminary that you, you learn because I always did my own study, like way
Hmm.
above and beyond. And like I was like absolutely enthralled by this since I was like probably 8 or 9 by this religion subject. I wanted to know everything about the history and stuff. And very early on, I remember finding out a lot of this stuff that like, oh, actually it really only goes back to like the second temple. And actually, and the thing that came before the second temple was the Babylonian captivity. And so what you're really reading is actually quite a lot of Talmud, not so much Bible, much more Talmud. And or I should say less Torah, more Talmud. And yeah, and initially I was like a little bit shaken by it, but then I'm like, nah, no big deal. and I kind of moved on because I just other interests, that things I wanted to know about. But when you like tell me some of the things that like shocked you, because like you don't quite, like you said, you don't hear that in the pew. You don't hear a lot of the stuff in the pews.
Well, yeah, in Protestant churches, and especially I started going to a Baptist church, and then I switched over more to like an Anabaptist church, more of a Reform
Mhm. Yeah.
Baptist church, doctrine of election kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and so
They were the original Christians before Constantine and his Catholic bastards, killed them all.
the so I was going to church down there, and I was like, well, I really want to study, and I want to do it in a formal setting. And my pastor had graduated Knox Theological Seminary, which is part of Coral Ridge Presbyterian in Fort Lauderdale. And so he got me in there. I didn't have my undergraduate degree, so they just hooked me up. Basically, they said
Mhm.
you can take as many classes as you want. You're never gonna, unless you get your undergrad, you're not going to get a diploma, but you can get as many credits as you want, and you have full access to the library and everything like that. So the first class obviously is textual criticisms, and
Yeah.
that's the one that screws everybody up
Hmm.
when you go to seminary. Now, my dad went
Why?
to seminary. My dad went to Southern Baptist Seminary, and one of the things he warned me was, he goes, look, you're gonna take classes that are gonna shake you, because it's just the way it is. There's a he starts telling me there's a reason why they don't talk about um certain things in church. These are things that the pastor is supposed to know, but it doesn't make any sense to talk about. So like, okay, so where did these texts come from, and where did certain passages come from? And have you heard the like a Q document, which is
Yeah.
hilarious? Yeah,
Q.
yeah. So that is one of the
It's a single source for the Gospels.
yeah. So it's like when you learn about that, because they don't really talk about that in a Protestant
Mhm.
church. So when you learn about that, you're like, oh, okay. And I remember being in the class, and I didn't know anybody else in the class, but there was two people behind me who knew each other. And when they started talking about Q, one leans over to the other and goes, "This is scary." And I was like, I don't know if it's scary. I don't know if I'd call it scary, but what I would call it is interesting. And then immediately I just thought, this is all a scam, because they know this, the pastors know this, and they're not willing to share this information with you.
Hmm.
And
And tell people a little bit about that significance, because I know Q it has like some German word. It's an abbreviation for like some German word. I forget
yeah,
what it is.
I don't remember
But
the word either.
basically, you have the four Gospels. Three of them are like synoptic. In other words, they are basically a retelling of the same story. And then there's John, who's a little bit different. But
John's a lot different.
yeah, so to
John's
say
a
the
lot
very
different. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why there are three synoptics and one John, basically.
Right. Well,
And
Mark,
the
people
first one,
think that basically that Luke and Matthew were sourced from Mark and Q, because you can see in the synoptic gospels how there are word for word passages that are shared. I mean, and that just, I'm sorry, that did
yeah,
not happen by providence.
no,
It just didn't. And so you start wondering, you're like, okay, so well, there's 66 books in this one. The New American Bible has what, 6 70 71 Catholic Bible?
the Catholic Bible is 72,
Yeah,
60 years,
72.
six extra books, and you find out that that wasn't that the when you were trained as a Protestant that the Bible only has 66 books. Only for the last 500 years. For the first like
Yeah.
1500, it had an extra 70. It had 72,
And the
and actually for the first
Orthodox have
300.
more.
Yeah, and actually for the first 300, there wasn't a Bible.
Right.
It wasn't until like you actually like the tail end of the 4th century that we actually got like the original 72 book canon. And then you're like, well, what happened? And because you have like and as you mentioned, like you have Orthodox churches that have more than 72. Like
Sure.
they'll actually include, like, I think it's the Ethiopian church that has
The Book
like
of
first and
Enoch.
second Enoch. Yeah,
Yeah,
real
yeah,
fun stuff.
yeah.
And
The Eritrean church
yeah,
has Enoch too. Yeah.
yeah, and the and then you start learning, oh, there's extra things here that I was never told about. And and you start learning a little bit about these books, and that, like, oh, actually that they're not like independently sourced. They're actually basically all the same source, telling it three separate ways. And the Mark is his own source, and then Q is an extra source on top of that, that's giving extra details to Matthew and Luke and John. And the and then yeah, and then you find out, like, you go back into the Old Testament, as I was kind of mentioning earlier, and they start doing textual criticisms there. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that?
Oh, the Old Testament? Well, here's the thing, okay? One of the cool things is when you start looking at textual criticism of the Old Testament, there are some old documents that
Really old.
really old that show that the Old Testament is pretty friggin' close to what they were looking at 2200, 2300 years ago. You know, like then you start looking at stuff like Job, which
Mhm.
is generally thought to be the oldest book in the Bible, like the oldest
Yeah,
thing
older
written.
than Genesis.
Yeah,
I
older
mean,
than
it's
Genesis.
like way back.
Yeah, and I it's hard for me to, because all of the textual criticisms I did were the worst things I saw. Well, the biggest problems I saw were in the New Testament. And when you look at the Old Testament, you really start digging into it. It's like eh, I'm sure there's problems, but there's nowhere near the kind of questions you have as when it comes to the Gospels. I mean, the Gospels are just,
Mhm.
it's like the Sermon on the Mount versus the Sermon on the Plain.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean,
Did the centurion say he was the son of God, or did he say he was innocent?
yeah,
That's a big difference. That's a
yeah,
really big difference.
yeah.
And and there's other stuff like it's like the big thing that like kind of like screwed with my head a little bit is that actually we really don't have any documents that are older than the Second Temple Judaism, which is after they came back from the Babylonian captivity. And it's even recorded in Ezra, where he says that Ezra had to repeat the whole Old Testament from memory.
Yeah.
It's like all of this from memory. It's like, that's either really spectacularly impressive, or maybe he missed a few things, or maybe he embellished a few things, or maybe he messed a few things up. And hopefully he's guided by the Holy Spirit such that they are true, even if they're not factual. And that's the part that like really kind of threw me for a loop initially, was that, some of these things are true. Yes, God created the earth and all that. Is it, and like, as far as like factually accurate in like 7 days or something like that, that part was hard for me. And, and the fact that like, we don't have any records older than that is like what really threw me for a loop. Because when I started like really reading into the Old Testament by myself, I noticed like, okay, they spent 400 years in Egypt, and then they spent, that was the time of captivity. And then they spent, really exactly 400 years. And then they spent exactly 400 years in the book of Judges, in the time of liberty, suppose. Yeah. Liberty.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems with the Old Testament is the names.
Yes. Oh yes. The names, because
Yeah.
they basically tell a story.
Yeah, the names are just too I'm
That's like,
sorry.
that cannot
They
be.
yeah, David was not named David. Solomon
Probably
was
not.
not named Solomon. It just matches up too close to oh, David was God's most beloved. So David means blessed. Solomon
Mhm.
Solomon presided over the largest, the longest peacetime, and his name means peace. It just come on. Come
Mhm.
just give us a break, all right?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the stories, like when you actually do the genealogies,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
and like when you look at like the genealogies, actually like will straight up tell stories, and like if you look at, and one of the things that like kind of like it really made me it really made me think, because like if you look at like the line of Canaan, or like the like the really bad dude in the Old Testament, who, by the way, really interesting. It's like like think of like the like the sons of Noah when they spread out after the flood. Where do you get, where do they go? Well, Japheth and Ham basically go north. Ham was supposed to go south, but he ended up going kind of north. And and when you look at like the names of of like them and their sons, it lines up with like the Greek gods and all that stuff. Like Japheth, Jupiter, and Prajapati, same exact person in the Hindu religion, like basically your creator god, your Zeus archetype. And you look at the grandson of or basically like Canaan, you have Kronos. And he's like the same exact same exact kind of person. Was he due to his father Noah, Uranus? And there's like that story that you see the same exact thing in Greek. And yeah, and so like these stories are really really old. And actually, like, oh yeah, like where Poseidon, Po for father, Sidon is the grandson of Canaan. And so literally father Sidon, and his daughter, his son was Atlas, who's who's the guy. No, he's the father of his daughters were called the Hesperides. But where that that land is? Spain, Hispania. And
Mm.
it was called the land of the Hesperites. That's basically they're tracing their lineage all the way back to like a biblical character there, which that was like, okay, this is like way too much of a coincidence, like which like that, because that's like the really really old book in Genesis, where you're seeing stuff like that, and you're seeing these names carried through in the secular side, where I'm like, well, how much of this is like, okay, so clearly there's elements of truth in this. And there's also like like when they see like like how is it like the law itself written compared to like like the Babylonians, like the law in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, when it's talking about their debt laws, which are really really interesting about how they had the Jubilee and all that. And it's basically verbatim, how it was written in Babylon. Like that was a Babylonian invention probably, and the Jews kind of appropriated it because it
Well,
worked out great for
and
the
and
bankers.
and look at apocalyptic literature. That's from the Orient.
Yeah.
It's directly from the Orient. It's been traced to the Orient. So, when we start seeing it I mean, really, the creation has is apocalyptic literature, and then you get into Daniel, and then later into Revelation. I mean, this
Hmm.
wasn't nothing like this was taught or was found anywhere
Hmm.
in that area of the world. That actually came from much further, much
Much
further
further
east.
east.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I mean, there's so many things. I mean, the one thing that I will say is that it got to the point where studying studying the textual criticisms and everything, I just got to the point where I'm like, this is not inerrant. Maybe there exists something out there, and that
Well,
really
not in the
that
Protestants. It's not inerrant in the Protestant sense where they say this is factually accurate. Whereas, like in the Catholic sense, we would say that the Bible is inspired and true, which is very different than factual. And true is
right,
a
yeah,
direction. It's in the direction of truth, and is reliable for you for your understanding that you can know God. If you want to say, oh, this is factually accurate, like a real history book,
yeah. There's gonna be
maybe.
some issues there, and so when you're in a Protestant church and you're hearing this, yeah,
Because you're coming from
it's a problem.
Protestantism where it's like hardcore inspired the word of
Yeah.
God. And
So I found an old I found some books by a German named Ernst Käsemann, and he from reading his books, because he came to the same conclusion Karl Barth came to the same conclusion, and it just he helped me to realize that once you abandon the what what I took to what I was calling and really upset my pastor, and probably what got me kicked out of the church, was I started calling the Bible a paper pope.
That's a pretty good one.
And and yeah, that was pretty much what did
That'll
it.
do it.
And yeah, and from that point on, what I from reading Caseman, he basically said that when he abandoned the inerrancy of the Bible as the Protestants teach it, that's when he felt like he became closer to God.
Same.
And I've heard the same thing from someone who's been on my show, who I don't know if I don't want to name him because I don't know if
Mm,
he wants me to say it and everything, but he said the same thing. He said that, as soon as he abandoned the whole inerrancy according to Protestantism, he
mhm.
felt like he became closer to God. And he said that he saw the world more clearly now because he wasn't being guided.
Yeah.
He wasn't being
Because
guided by something.
well, when you're trying to be guided by facts, that doesn't quite work. When you're being guided by truth, that works because truth is much more of a pattern. And and the truth is in the patterns, in the direction, not the actual points. And I had the same thing because I was raised like kind of a hybrid where I was really, really, really devout Catholic on my own, in a Catholic family. My mother was Episcopal, but that's basically Catholic minus the Pope.
Close enough.
And so, but I was also like at a evangelical Church of Christ Protestant school from pre-K3 until I graduated high school as a senior. And they gave us daily Bible classes, and so a lot of Protestantism really rubbed off on me. And it's like, and between my Catholic research and my which a lot of it was autodidactic, I really just like ran straight forward, taught myself, I wanted to learn everything. And and like but and my Protestantism at the same exact time, a lot rubbed off on me. And the that getting rid of that biblical inerrancy, that I really picked that one up from the Protestants. And that one was hard to get rid of. Like that one, like when I was I mean, I spent like probably a good 6 years out, from college all the way through probably like my mid-20s, where I was having trouble. I never really like lost my faith or fell away, but I was having real trouble, like trying to reconcile all the other stuff I was learning with, and I eventually just realized that, oh, it's like the inerrancy it's not a Catholic doctrine, and this is not, it never has been. And okay, I think we
Well,
need
it
to
has to
step
be
away.
for Protestantism
Hmm.
because they've
To ban the Pope,
abandoned because they've
they've abandoned
abandoned
authority.
all authority. And that's one thing that God, I'm gonna catch so much crap for saying this,
Oh
but
yeah.
even more so than talking to you or listening to the Contra Gentiles podcast has
Oh
really
my god, I'm
opened
glad you
my
mentioned it.
eyes to so much, and it's yeah.
Oh, I had a point I was going to make about them, but I forget what it'll come back to me. But because I was listening to that yesterday when I was prepping for this. God, it'll come back to me eventually. But moving forward, moving into like, okay, your faith is really shaken, and you're moving into a kind of a more secular phase of your life. And it's like, so you've left the seminary, and you're kind of like, this is around the same time as when you're starting getting into libertarianism, right?
No,
Or is that
no,
later?
that was later. That was about 5 years later. I left the seminary mostly because I had learned pretty much what I wanted to learn. I probably could have kept going and had enough credits that if I ever did finish my undergrad, I could have gotten, my, yeah, but my divinity. But yeah, I just wasn't really interested anymore. And then a couple of my friends, we had one friend, he came to inerrancy. He abandoned inerrancy right about the same time I did. And another friend of ours just wasn't really into going to church. He wanted to do like home churches. So on Sundays we would just meet at my house and everything like that, and we'd share a meal and stuff like that. And then I just after that I didn't really want to go back to church. It just didn't. Yeah, and even after one of those people moved away, and then we all ended up not really doing that anymore. I met Jen soon after, and I just started a relationship that I knew was going to be long term. So
Oh, I remember the point. That you got that. I remembered listening to you guys on Contra Gentiles. And he was making the point comparing Protestants and Orthodox, because this guy's an Eastern Rite Catholic, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
And he had a funny line that was like, well, the reason you're getting so many converts to Eastern Orthodoxy from Protestantism is that you can have all of the benefits of 2,000 years of tradition, and you can still say the Pope is a moron. I'm like, boy, I got some news for you. It's like the Latins can still say the Pope is a moron.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And but yeah, it was that that kind of idea of like non serviam. Like those are the words that the church fathers say, that that was the issue with Satan. He didn't want to serve God. Non serviam, I will not serve. And
Right.
he was pissed that humans had been elevated to being the like God's beloveds, and angels were just meant to serve. And he was like the original racist, basically. And go ahead, take it away.
It's funny. Non-serviam came up in my interview this afternoon. So
really,
yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
Oh, what a coincidence.
So, yeah, but
yeah, that little archetype right there, is ironically something we both kind of went for, when like with libertarianism.
I wrote notes here on that.
Mhm.
It was like when you go to the flock and you say, I don't believe in inerrancy anymore. That's why the whole thing with
taxation is not theft.
Yeah, the whole thing with libertarianism and being like, what? This is I don't know, there's something going on here. And then everybody starts attacking me and everything like that. Well, I'd already been through that,
Yep.
and it's much worse coming from a spiritual place than it is from coming from some pseudo political place.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah,
this is a really lame church by comparison.
I already had pretty good. I had a lot of experience in being judged by the in group, and and like literally being like, yeah, well, you're gonna have to leave.
Well, it's
So,
like for me, it's like you see it so much on the other side, where you're like, this is ideological possession. And it's like, once you recognize that about the LP, you understand why they react so viscerally to us saying that this thing's a waste of time. It's like, imagine saying like, man, the Baptist church is a real waste of time. It's like, and can you imagine the kind of reaction you're going to get? Me too. And that is like about the same as saying the LP is the waste of time. And because you're literally saying that, no, you shouldn't go. Yeah, no, what you really need to do is not go to that church. You need to go to my church. My church has the real authority. And it's like, and of course, because you're saying, okay, don't do the LP, do the GOP or whatever. That's what they think our argument is. It's not, but they're having this real hardcore emotional reaction because this thing is their secular religion. Like kind of what Matt Erickson says, that it's not that libertarianism has an atheism problem, it is an atheism problem. And the problem is they're still human, and they still have this need for worship. They have this need for a moral community, and they've basically outsourced that to the LP. which tells them you can do anything you want, no matter, like, as long as you can dream it and you're not hurting anybody or taking their stuff. And that's why it becomes the world's biggest outpatient clinic, according to Rothbard.
Well, yeah, and the whole thing about, yeah, and I've never been critical of what the Mises Caucus was doing. I've been critical of why do you it's almost like they want the authority. Like if they don't take over the LP, they're not going to have a sense of
They're
authority
purifying the
or
church.
something like that. Yeah,
No,
it's and
they're
yeah, they're
purifying the
purifying the
church.
church. Yeah, yeah. You know,
It's like
and
there's heretics in here, and we have to get them out. We have to call a council, and and have push the heretics out of the church. This is not right, and what we need is a new and better pope. That's that's their chairman election right there. That's the pope for them, and
yeah.
or maybe you call him the pastor. If you're not comfortable with that language, but that's effectively what it is, and that so that for them it's like that uh they're not doing this out of like because they've really reasoned this out, and you're arguing with them on the basis of, oh, we actually need to be doing this for actual political reasons, and we need actual political power, we need actual results. It's like, no, we don't. It's like that. Because they're coming at it from a complete. This is not a position they reasoned themselves into. They emotioned their way into this because they're fulfilling a need for Christianity in their life, or really, a need for church or need for religion that is not being filled right now. And so, and this is why I wanted to mention ideological possession a little bit earlier, because I feel like this is the number one reason that it's easy to get some people out, and or that some people are much more easy to separate from the LP than others. And they're the ones who already have some sort of religion in their background, where they either have it currently or they were trained, real well in it, and
They have an
then left it for
identity. They have an identity outside of their politics.
Yes, but because your religious identity is by far the closest thing to your personal identity, because who you become who you worship. This is one of the truths of the Old Testament, is that whoever you worship is the kind of person you're going to become. If you worship a god like Baal who wants child sacrifice and shit like that, it's like you're going to have a real shit show of a society. If you're a society like ours that worships the self, and really worships your future self and your future potential, that's necessarily going to be a society that also kills its kids, because you have to sacrifice them on the altar of your future self and your own future gratification. And when you start looking at it through a civilization through a religious lens, you start seeing a whole lot of patterns emerge, particularly if you've read the Bible, because you'll see the same exact patterns.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that in 2020, when I realized what was going on, and I started revisiting my faith and everything, that's when I realized that I was using politics and ideology as identity, who I am. And you see it where the most obvious things, if you want to call yourself something, the easiest things to call yourself are son, daughter, father, mother, brother, sister,
Mm-hmm.
Christian, Muslim, whatever. And those actually mean something. I mean, those you can actually there's actually a proof there. There's actually a faith. There's actually a history there. Calling yourself an anarchist, you're LARPing. You're not an anarchist. You're not living as an anarchist. You're not a libertarian. No one's living as a libertarian. I mean, maybe there are some people who've stripped it down far
Mm-hmm.
enough and they're outside, but
Ace.
yeah,
Just
these
saying.
aren't these ideology that's never going to exist in your lifetime, in reality, making that your like identity, that's really sad. And
Yeah.
it's something that I did, and I can say it because it was like I ran around calling myself an anarchist or an ANCAP or a libertarian for so long, and that's who I was. I mean, it's like literally, it's like a vegan.
Hmm.
It's you're basically the vegans of politics, libertarians and anarchists, because you tell everyone you meet.
And
Yes.
what what's particularly sad about it is that as a sect of little p Protestantism, I'm not saying that to be to be inflammatory. I'm saying it's like there's Christians, capital C, there's lowercase Christians as well, lowercase c Christians as well. There's capital P Protestants who like really believe in God and Christ and all of that. Then there's like little p Protestants, because they're coming out of liberalism, they're coming out of the Protestant Reformation. Like Curtis Yarvin says, the Protestant Reformation never really stopped. The reformers just kept right on reforming until they reformed Christ right out of the church, and which is
Well,
how we
they
got the
became
LP.
progressive. It became a progressivism, basically.
Mhm.
It's what I mean. Progressivism is a splinter of Protestantism, of the
Yeah,
Protestant Reformation.
and it's like the reformers
or
never stopped,
or
and
as the guys from Contra Gentiles call it, the Protestant Revolt.
yeah, that was when it became the Protestant Revolt, and but what you see as a that's very distinctive of Protestantism in all of its forms was that because, and this is partly the standards of its birth, the circumstances of its birth that were carried forward 500 years, where when you see religions like the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, these are not just a religion. These are like comprehensive worldviews. These are not, they will inform your social view, your family view, your political views, and your religious views, and not just that, like how you view reality, how your philosophical worldviews, like your metaphysics and your epistemology, like how causality works, how how you can know the things how you know truth. And there's ethical worldviews, it's ethical views in this, views of like basic morality, and in these, where these are like, they're not like Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. These are not just religions, these are comprehensive worldviews. And what you get when you get the Protestant Reformation, because it was never designed, like the reason we got the Protestant Reformation was that what happened was that you had a real idiot pope named is one of the Borgias, of course. It's like really famous criminal gang family that managed to like take over the papacy. And so he had a really great idea, because what happened was, in like remember when Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 or something like that. And so this is right around that time, and he finds Hispaniola and all that. He comes back and he starts bragging to the Portuguese guy, and the Portuguese king is like, hey, that you remember how you said you didn't want to fund me? Well, too bad. And because I just found the new world for Spain. And the Portuguese king is kind of upset about that. So he goes to the like him and the Spanish king have had like a feud for a long time about who's in charge of like land, to that side. And so they go to this Alexander Borgia Pope, who's like, he's like the international lawyer. He was going to be mediating for them of who does all this property belong to, and where is the law, and who gets to draw the line. So this is why you have parts of the America where they speak Portuguese, and everywhere else where it was Spanish. And this is when that happened. This is called the Treaty of Tordesillas. And what happened right there was that the Pope said, all right, anything to the west of this line belongs to Spain, and everything else belongs to Portugal. And so he basically also gave Africa and Indonesia and all that to Portugal. And the problem with when he did that is, he divided the whole world between Spain and Portugal, because he needed Spain's help for military security. There's just a really short-sighted way of playing that, because you basically said that, okay, well, we're entering the age of colonialization, and the only two states who are allowed to colonize anywhere at all are Spain and Portugal. And so we're going to give Spain two whole continents, Spain and Portugal, two whole continents to themselves, and assume that England, Germany, France, Netherlands, Italy are not going to have a problem with that. So, so for 500 years prior, really no schisms, no heresies. We had some, but they were unsuccessful. And then within 20 years of the Treaty of Tordesillas, we had 4 simultaneous state-funded reformations going on at the same time, all of them funded by states who were pissed about the Treaty of Tordesillas, because they wanted to go colonize. You're telling me we're going to give 2 whole continents to Spain? Really? And so there's they're looking, Protestantism was designed as just a religion to just undermine the political authority of the Pope. That was all it was ever meant to be, and it's spiraled wildly out of whack then, because in doing so, in undermining the Pope's authority, they undermined the authority of the kings themselves, and and so that's how we got the fucking Republicans, lowercase r Republicans. And so it's by trying to overthrow the Pope, they themselves ended up getting basically overthrown by the liberals, and the worst of which was the French. And so when we get to with Protestantism, because of its history, it was never designed to be a comprehensive worldview at all. It really just takes the place of one little sliver of your life, which is your mythos, your religion, and all that. And this is something that you see carried forward all the way into libertarianism and stuff like that, where it was, it really just takes that one part of your life that's really and you've absolutized that to your whole identity. And and that's really, really sad, because what what the inheritance of the West, and the East for that matter, should have been was a comprehensive worldview that informed you about all of reality, not just one little sliver. And now we've gotten degenerated from there to such a point in America where it's you don't even have a religion anymore. You don't have a philosophical worldview. You might have a very, very woefully incomplete ethical view, which is the thin ethical framework that thin libertarianism supposedly is. It's not. And and your church is basically the LP. You went from the glory of the Catholic Church and Christian monarchy, and the Renaissance, to the LP in under 500 years. That is a tragedy by any measure, unless you're a Lulbert and you think the Catholic Church is evil or something like that, and you're just dumb.
I remember there was this Christian bookstore in Fort Lauderdale that was pretty based. I mean, they had Puritan books and stuff like that. They carried Banner of Truth Publishing, and that was what I lived on for
I've never heard of them.
A long time. Yeah. And it was mostly English Puritan, Scottish Puritan stuff. And I mean, that stuff is pretty based. I mean, they have a lot of really good parenting and relationship books that are really good. And I was talking to the owner of the store, and they were a Protestant, and I said, he said something like, there's a country and Western church in Wilton Manors now. And I'm like, okay, so what do you mean? He's like, no, they have their own denomination. And I said, well, how many denominations do you think there are, Protestant denominations do you think there are in the United States right now? And he said, well, it's 45,000. And this is in 2001, 2002. So I can just imagine what it is now. So if there's only one reason why you have 45,000 splinters from Protestantism, it's because there's no authority. You're the authority. Everyone's an authority. 45,000 authorities. And now it probably is double. Who the hell knows?
I mean, that was fundamental to Martin Luther, where he was I am the biblical interpreter, because I am, man himself.
He wrote his own catechism.
Yeah. but like from that biblical interpretation is where we get the wokeism from. Direct line from the Reformation. Or McIntyre made this line, this thing that you can draw a direct line from the Protestant Reformation to like this transgenderism, because what you ended up getting with because man is competent to just look at the scriptures and determine God's truth, therefore, and find it from inside of himself to know that he's saved. All he has to do is really believe and then just know that he's saved, and he can ascertain this divine truth. We'll carry that forward logically. If you can do the divine truth, you can do human truth from the inside out too. And and like you don't need to receive it from any external authority, really. You just find it inside, find that truth inside of yourself, and you find, if you can find God's truth inside of yourself, then you can find human's truth inside yourself. And so you can say that, no, actually, I may have a dick and balls, but I'm a chick, I'm a woman. And because I found that truth inside of myself. And that's where that logic comes from. And so when the man himself does not have to conform his mind to the external reality. See, in the Catholic and Orthodox views, truth is when my mind is conformed to external reality perfectly. And so I have objective truth when when the brain pictures I have in my mind match reality. And whereas what Martin Luther did was he said, I have truth when I decide it's true, and I don't have to do that I don't have to conform my mind to external reality at all. And I don't even have to conform it outside of my own body. It was where that ended up. And so so that, like, and you carry that forward, yeah, you're going to get a crap load of denominations, because now they don't have to conform their mind to anything. They just make it up as they go along. And
Well, it's not even that. It's much more insidious than that. And I didn't really think about it back then when I was leaving the church. I thought about it recently, is that if you have 45,000 Christians, people calling themselves Christians, who can't agree, who can't find enough common ground that they have to split. I mean, why does that not bother anyone? That really should bother you, because what that means is that you're interpreting the scripture one way, and you're saying this is exactly what it is. And what really led me down that road was eschatology, because there are so many people who read well, it's going to happen this way. It's post millennial, it's premillennial, it's mid millennial, it's preterism, it's all, yet all of these things,
it's not
dispensational.
even
You have,
true.
you have all
Religion's the
these
opiate.
things.
Well, it's like, it's not even true. Religion's the opiate of the masses. Again, the reformers kept going until they reformed Christ out of the church, and you get guys like Karl Marx. It's like, and you get the progressive era. It's like, it's not just that, like that, they're reforming and getting new denomination of Christianity. They're getting like non-Christian denominations with this method too. And by the way, it's like, it's not, I don't quite say it's I don't really want to lump, this is why I say lowercase p Protestants, because the lowercase p Protestants are the real bloodthirsty motherfuckers. As like your progressives, your fascists, your commies. It's like the three groups that fought World War I and II. Or I should say, no, not World War I, but World War II. And so it's like there were no good guys in that war. It's like we weren't the good guys. We were just another one of the bad guys in that war. And so I don't blame Protestants quite for them, but like, that I do make a real distinction there.
Yeah, and it really, if every church has its authority that tells you exactly what the scripture means, it's then,
and
if
some
the
churches
pastor,
have quite a few of them.
Yeah, if I know the church I went to, the pastor and his brother, who was a deacon, both had masters in divinity. So it's like, and they didn't agree, and one was a Baptist and the other one was really Presbyterian. And I know he was Presbyterian because he went back to Presbyterian church after he got run out of that church. And so you can make the argument that Catholicism doesn't have the truth, that Orthodoxy doesn't have the truth. but at least there is at least there is
There's a unifying
an
authority.
authority. There's a unifying authority. Protestantism is just basically anarchy in the worst sense of the word. You can believe whatever you want as long as you believe in the blood of Christ. Then everything else you can believe. It doesn't matter. You have them
Mhm.
arguing. I mean, literally going to a PCA church and not believing in the Protestant version of pedobaptism.
Okay.
I mean, it was, and I'm going to I don't believe in pedobaptism as far as Protestantism goes. So I'm going to a PCA church where that's all they want to make fun of you for that. They want to call you out in class because of that. They want to like put you on display because of that. It's like, I mean, it's some of the most insane. And then it's like, okay, so where is that in the scripture? And then they start coming up with all of these like things that don't mention water, don't mention a child, and it's like, okay, I mean, I can understand where you're coming from, but it seems like a leap to, pouring water, and that's one thing that always bothered me about the Presbyterians so much is they're so when they baptize, they just splash water on you. They don't actually like baptize you because
that's like not
that
a
would
full
be
immersion.
it would be unseemly, where when you go look at the Greek Orthodox Church,
Oh yeah, full
looks at
block.
the term baptizo and they say, well, yeah, it means dip. So
Yeah.
I mean,
And
there's so much.
yeah, and they can't even quite justify it because if they were going to like they don't know enough. Get like if you were going to like, I know how you do it as a Catholic. You say, oh well, then in the Jewish thing, you had to call it the Tevi law, which was like ceremonial washings, and that was not a full dip. That was just like rub it up and scrub and sprinkling, and you could at least if you as a Catholic, you at least know that, and you can like tie it back. Where like the Protestants, because they've rejected all of that authority, they don't even know that, and they don't, and so. Anyway, but I want to move forward because that central function of what the central function of Protestantism is a rejection of authority, specifically of the Pope. And that was why it was created in the first place. At least we've all read Burnham, I hope, where we understand the elites use ideology and religion for their own purposes, and they don't have to believe it at all. They're like reptiles; they just lie.
Yeah, they don't.
And so like this was true. It's true now. It's true 100 years ago when like Burnham was writing it. Like 80 something. 80 years ish. He was writing that in the 40s, 30s or 40s sometime. And it's also true 500 years ago, when the Protestant Reformation was getting kicked off. And so it's that central rejection of authority that you see carry through all the way into libertarianism. And again, where does it come from? Non serviam. I will not serve.
Yeah.
Because it's not in my interest.
No gods, no masters.
Exactly. And but it's
notice everything in libertarianism is a bumper sticker.
Pretty much. It's like you've reduced the Nicene Creed to the nap. You know what I mean? It's like you've or the Apostles' Creed if you're Anglican. No, the Orthodoxy, they would say the Nicene Creed. They do say the Nicene Creed. So yeah, like if you're like Orthodox or Catholic, you've reduced the greatest creed in like human history down to like the nap. It's like Jesus fucking Christ. But what really did it was this attitude of that was basically from the very beginning of I will not serve, and it's like this is an explicitly demonic attitude. And what's interesting is that, like, because we talk about ideological possession, and the thing that really seems to immunize people is having a religion. Like I've noticed one after another, the people who are most open to like the post-libertarian moment and the Praxian message invariably are Christians, or they have or they're Jewish, like real Jewish, like they like Orthodox Jewish, like I practice this thing, and not like some reformed Jew or whatever that, or just like secular Jew, and not like that kind. And it's like they have some sort of religion that inoculates them against ideological possession. They're possessed by some other spirit already, so therefore they cannot be possessed by the ideology of libertarianism. And the thing, and what it really started to come out that like for me, like in 2016, 2017, where I started to notice, like with the left, because I didn't start to notice it with libertarians initially, like until 2020. But with the left around 2017, that visceral emotional reaction to Trump. It's like, because their religion is not the Democrat Party. Their church is not the Democrat Party. It is the state. And it's like imagine imagine like being a Catholic and having Trump elected to Pope. It's like that's the kind of reaction that the left had. Is like they just had an orange-haired buffoon elected to their Pope, and after Obama, it's like so you're going from like Gregory the Great as Pope to like Donald Trump. It's like oh that's going to be a real step down, and they're going to be having a real tough time with it. And this is when I started to notice, oh, this is something a little more extreme than just ideological possession, because what you started to see was like almost like like almost demonic. And it's like initially it just seemed like just a little like, oh, they'll spray paint a church here or something like that. And then like towards the end of Trump's term, you were seeing like churches in Canada and shit like getting like physically burned to the ground like by Antifa. And it's like, and why would you go out? It's like, like these churches have like nothing at all to do with politics. It's just Antifa kind of being douchebags. And, it's like, you would think, oh, maybe it's just vandalism. They're communists. And that was another thing. The communists, they really hated religion precisely for this reason, because, it inoculates people against ideology. And
well, the communists, they needed to make themselves gods. They needed the people to see them as gods, them as the authority. And anarchists have it the same way. Is there are a lot of anarchists who are completely like anti-god, no gods, no masters, and that's because they need to make themselves god.
Which is precisely what Lucifer wanted to do. He's Lucifer, the usurper. And he tried to overthrow God. It's like you're not, because you don't see it my way. Either you're not moral or you're not all powerful. And I kind of think it's a little bit of both. So I'm going to try to overthrow you. And he got his ass kicked by the first right wing Chad, St. Michael, who's on my wall, who's like he's the first right wing Chad who threw the first lefty out of a really high place over a large body of water. I love looking at it that way. Very, very, pat myself on the back with that one. But yeah, and so it's like this thing goes all the way back to the beginning. As you're just very interesting to me that when this pattern started to really emerge with the left, it like that was when it was first telling. I first started to get this idea that it's like
even in the garden, they're rejecting authority.
It's like they want to be the authority.
Yeah.
And you see that like with kind of ANCAPs and progressives both, where it's like they want to be the authority. ANCAPs are, I'm sorry, progressives are way more upfront about it. That I want to be the ruler, I want to be the dictator, I want to be the Democrat.
Well,
power to the people.
It's like Yarvin said. He said, these are the same people who would see like one like sovereign over them to be just anathema. Yet they want 7 billion sovereigns. That sounds like a bad idea. I mean, I'm fairly sure I know some people personally who could handle themselves, and from a morality standpoint, absent the state. I also know some people that I don't even want to think of. I mean, it's like literally if the state ended, I'd probably have to search them out and take them out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because it would just be too dangerous to keep them around.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of made this point a few times as well that, a lot of these people, they're not really libertarians, they're revolutionaries. And it's like, like when you see this, like with Mark Claire, when when that visceral reaction to him saying he's basically just giving them sound financial advice, and they're taking it as you're calling us poor losers, and you think that we shouldn't have power over our own government. And I'm like, if you think that this is what he's saying is you should, as poor people, shouldn't have power over your own government, and you have a problem with that as an ANCAP, as a where all of the government is going to be based on private property. It's like, what, it's like, you think you have no say right now? Imagine what that's going to be like in Ancapistan. And so that's why I'm thinking, like, you guys are not serious at all about private property. Like, I'm dead serious about private property because I want I want a proper authority. And whereas these guys, they're just looking to rebel, and that they're just revolutionaries. And they're just like the incompetent revolutionaries who didn't understand, who weren't competent enough to understand that you need to be in the Democrat Party to really be effective at it. Yeah. And these are like the revolutionary LARPers. And like Mark kind of exposed this attitude that this is, again, this is the usurper mindset of I'm going to usurp the authority. And okay, the Republicans, the lowercase r Republicans, the little d Democrats, these are not legitimate authorities. Fair. Yeah, they're not. But you still have that same usurper attitude where, like, on the left and on libertarians, where they're really looking to overthrow the government, and on the right, because again, there's so much real Christianity there, that notch in their brain, that God-shaped hole in their heart is already filled. They're not looking to overthrow the system, and which is ironic because they're the ones getting persecuted by it. Yeah. And I really think that's where it comes from. Where that like, why is it that the right just wants to be left alone and the left is like the usurper who really wants to overthrow the system and be the dictator? It's like, well, okay, look at their spirituality, look at their spiritual life. And this is when it started to really hit me that, this whole demon thing, it's, even if you don't think it's factual, it's 100% true. It's like that, because you can just straight up see it. That these people are they're revolutionaries, they're usurpers, and the revolution never fucking ends for them. It's always one more thing, one more revolt against, like, I mean, they've gotten to the point where they're revolting against reality itself, saying that I'm not, even though I have a dick and balls, I'm really a chick. And it's like they've gotten to the point where there's nothing left to rebel against besides reality itself. And if you don't rebel with them, then you're like a traitor and you're in the enemy class, and you're someone they can really rebel against. And I've gotten to the point, like, looking at this where I'm like, okay, the demons are definitely true. I wonder if they're factual too. And that's
why that's why they want to take over the Libertarian Party, because the Libertarian Party doesn't have any authority.
Expound on that.
Well, I mean, if you go into the Republican Party, there's a way of doing things, and there's a history there. Mm-hmm. The Democrat Party has a history there. The LP has no history because they have no accomplishments. So you can go in there and you could just literally start making shit up. I mean, you can.
I see it.
Yeah, there is nothing there. So it's like no gods, no
authority.
Yeah, no gods, no masters. So there's no authority here. I mean, we have these planks and everything, and and what are the planks? Abortion, open borders, chaos and evil.
Pretty much. And you have the Moloch caucus, as I call them now. And if you're not going to take a real pro-life position, then I'm going to call you the Moloch caucus. If you're saying that you're Mr. and Mrs. Principled and you're going to fight like hell for libertarian principles, but when push comes to shove, and and you're trying to defend the single most fundamental right there is, the right to life, at the most logical point it can be given to us at conception, it's like, you're a fucking, it's like, and this is where you cuck and cower to the left. Well, maybe you're not cucking, cowering. Maybe you are the left, and we were right about you this whole time, that this is a leftist haven. And yeah, and so therefore I'm going to call you the Moloch caucus. So if you want to get your act together and adopt a real pro-life position, I'll shut up about that. But until then, you're the Moloch caucus because you're a bunch of cucks and cowards. And that's like the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you're actually a leftist.
Yeah. I mean, just look at what most of the Libertarian Party stands for right now. Basically stands for a good amount of leftist, even progressive stances. The question you have to ask is, if you were to get a hold of that, say you're somebody who believes in authority, the authority of the church, and you're getting ready to take over this church, and you're going to have to clean house, and you're going to have to change what's being taught. I mean, how much house is going to be cleaned here? Especially if your whole thing. I mean, imagine taking over a church that you think is a heresy, and you don't get rid of the heretics.
And not only do you not do that, you put them in charge, like they're doing right now. It's like, I mean, you're literally getting rid of one good guy who's a loyal foot soldier, Joshua Smith, and you're replacing him with a Sarwalk fan who was terrible on basically every issue, and is really just a leftist who's waiting to screw you. And you're like,
That's still going on. I thought that was from like months ago.
Nope, still going on, and Angela's still pushing him. And so, which really shows you which one's which. But anyway, but
I mean, I agree with though. They should be a lobby group.
They should
single issue or 2 issues, and to me, if you're going to put together a group for political action right now, and you are not modeling it on National Association for Gun Rights, you've completely failed. You've missed the point.
Oh yeah. And like the idea is, you need to be like, finding kind of like they do with like Fackle and all that.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. And that thing, like, that works. And
Joshua Ham makes a great point here. And if you're dependent on the parishioners for your food, will you actually throw the heretics out?
Oh, that's a good point. Good boy, Josh. That is like, and I'm thinking no, because I mean, they have those 2 donors that are basically like over half of the budget for the LP. And what happened, when they said, you had that one guy, Maj Toure, who came in and he started using the word faggot. And
which is an apt description of so many people in the Libertarian Party.
Mm-hmm. Why did they want him to to really moderate, because he was going to offend these donors? This is a donor conference, and he's going to be offending the donors if he uses a word like faggot. I can only imagine what they're going to do with Davis then there. And with his Legion of Skanks, it's going to be wonderful to watch. But it's like, are they even going to run Dave? If they're afraid of offending the donors like this. And of course, they gave Maj his options and he chose. It's like, I'm not going to be at the LP then if I can't say faggot. And so, it's like, no. To answer Joshua's question, doesn't look like they're going to throw out the heretics, because the heretics have the money. And again, it's like if you look back throughout church history, it's like these are not really theological discussions that they're having in the first millennium. It's basically, with like Arianism, Nestorianism, Pelagianism, monothelitism, and all of these. Basically all of these heresies are really just covers for political struggles, and they're being funded by the states at every turn. And it's like anytime there's 2 sides, it's like there's not really a discussion that happens at these church councils. They kind of exist just to establish a foregone conclusion of who's in the right politically and who's in the wrong politically. And and when you carry this all the way forward, hey, politics is still about money, even in the LP. what's happening? And it's like, it looks like they actually prefer to throw out the people who are not bringing money to the table than they do to throw out the actual heretics who are funding the heresy because they'd rather you fund them instead. And yeah, that it seems like, and I think there's a lot of people who are going to be very disappointed by this, because I genuinely think there's a lot of people in this movement, because what happens with libertarians a lot is they just grow into conservatives. Basically, they get a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and they kind of just grow into conservatives who are way better than the average conservative.
So
And
Nick Cooper, who I know personally, he's saying here, talking about when does even the LPMC become an enemy? And he says, case in point, Shane Hazel could be the reason why Stacey Abrams would become governor of Georgia.
I mean, if there's any sort of choice at all between insert Republican here and Stacey Abrams, you better take insert Republican here, because that's like, this should not be a hard choice at all. And if you are, and the fact that he's even going to risk this at all, like a real communist, like this is a real communist that you're talking about with Stacey Abrams. This is not like, like like oh, we call Obama a socialist, but really he's just like a left neoliberal. Yeah. And like, this is a real communist. Mm-hmm. And like this should not be a choice. And you're going to risk one of them getting in charge, and you think it's just to make some point, some
do better
point.
Do better, Republicans, do better.
Yeah, do better.
We won't spoil your elections if you do better.
Man, it's like I really think you're like that is the point where he's the enemy. Like this is, because if you were an ally, you would be at the local level trying to help people. And this is like, it's not just like, what are you doing? It's like, what are you not doing? And what would you be doing if you were sincere? And I think that's a really good way of highlighting. You have to see the unseen a little bit. And this is why I bring it back to this ideological possession of what kind of ideology is this? This is a satanic ideology. This is, I will not serve. I mean, it's the first words of Satan. I will not serve. No gods, no masters. And, and I would prefer to have the communist in charge and just make my own self-centered point. And like, so like, are the demons real? They're true. They truly exist. Do they factually exist? I'm kind of beginning to think, yeah, because who gets who gets taken over? It's the people with these sorts of anti-authority ideas, and who doesn't? It's the people who have a healthy respect for basically godly authority. It has nothing to do with like your family. It has very little to do with, well, it does, but it's very little to do with your family, very little to do with your where you're from or race or anything like that. It really all has to do with your view of authority. And do you do you have like a religious authority or not? If you do, then 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get taken in by you have some sort of respect for God. You have some sort of, like even like Islam or something like that. You don't quite get taken in, by the real satanic ideology. Like even even if you look at the elites, because you see it really well with the elites, like the Hillary Clintons, the Bidens, the Romneys, et cetera. Like, look at how they run their lives. Look at their families. What happens? With with like the Biden family, and how is their sexual practices going? Lots of incest going on. Lots of things that are not normal. They're not typical. No, they're not the typical type of sin. They're like a much darker, kind of revolutionary idea. It's like if you look at like what they're doing right now in Ukraine, It's like where they had a wonderful cash cow. Like I mean, this thing was like the mother of all corruption for 30 years, and they were making hand over fist. And what did they do? Like hand over fist money for a long, long time with all the corruption that they could do, and expanding NATO into it. And what did they do with it? It got to the point where they ended up like destroying all of their own cash cow just for the sake of basically chaos. Because like, I mean, what happened? They pushed Russia to war, which completely destroys their ability to be corrupt. Because I mean, let's face it, corruption really only works when there's peace. It doesn't work when there's
Right.
when there's like a literally you're getting bombed and shot at. So it's like they've literally, it's like they have been supporting chaos and self-destruction to the point, like the elites, to the point where they ended up losing their big cash cow that's paying Hunter Biden 50 grand a month for nothing really. And you see, and like you see, is like with the Clintons too. It's like everything they do seems to be like self-destructive to the like I mean, you even see it like on his face, like on Bill Clinton's face right now. This dude does not look healthy. And it's like, if you were just thinking of them as like just a regular run of the mill kind of human evil, you would be mistaken, because human evil, you kind of want to profit from it. If you're like the Mitch McConnell or something like that, you kind of just want to profit from it. Or if you're like the normal kind of just corruption and graft, and I'm going to pass this trade deal because I have I own an import export company with China or something like that. Or I'm going to hold up a trade deal for that exact reason or something like that. If you're like like Mike Lee or something like that, he owns like a trade company with China or something like that, and he was really upset about the USMCA because it basically rat fucks China. And so like I mean, that's the normal kind of human evil. Like, but the truly satanic is like I don't care about personal profit. I'm just here to cause chaos and cause trouble, and damn the profit. Because anything that's good for me is still a good. It's not a pure evil. and and that's the sort of thing that we don't really have concepts for. And so I look at that and I start thinking there's no real human interest here. This is like just a pure chaos maven that we're looking at. Are the demons actually factual? Is this ideological possession, when you couple it with power, does it actually become a factual existence? And so that's where I really started to like questioning that this is because here's it's like several examples where it looks like it's gone beyond, like, and like like the stuff you hear about like Jeffrey Epstein, like pedophile island and shit like that. It's like some of that stuff sounds like downright demonic. And I don't know how much of that is just conspiracy theory, but that they're not telling us all about that. And maybe it's because they're trying to protect their buddies in Israel. I don't know. It's like that the idea you're going to use 10-year-olds and child rape and stuff like that as a blackmail tool or something like that, or that it would even get to that point. It's like you're dealing with a non-human kind of evil. Like if this was just a regular kind of old bad person, I like it because C.S. Lewis, he made this point that a bad man knows he's not very good, whereas a really bad man thinks he's doing quite all right. And this has gone beyond like a basic recognition of I'm a bad person or whatever, and this has gotten to the point where like there's something like truly downright bad here. And like to the point, this doesn't look quite human. You're taking notes. If you you go ahead.
Well, it's not even that. It's that I know people who were staunch atheists and still question, that are like changing their mind, and they're coming over, and even if they don't come all the way over, they're still, it's shaking them. And what is shaking them? It is the fact that unnatural things have become normalized, things that exist outside of nature. And the question is how much you have to take into consideration psyops too.
Yeah,
A lot of
I
these
agree.
things are psyops. We know that crisis actors exist. So what are we looking at half the time? But the thing is, still is, even if they don't know about psyops, even if they don't know about crisis actors, they're questioning reality. And the reason they're questioning reality is because they're seeing things that are outside the scope of their reality. And when people start seeing things outside the scope of their reality, it really starts to change their worldview. And I can honestly say that when you see the reactions of some of these people to just, John and I were talking today about how you could put a you could put up a mural of George Floyd and people put flowers in front of it. You put up a mural of a white woman holding a white baby, and that's going to be it'll they'll deface it.
Yeah, the
It'll
Virgin
be
Mary,
destroyed.
basically.
Yeah, it'll be destroyed. And so I think it's
They hate the image of the good. It's not just that they love the bads; they hate the image of the good. And for no like real self-serving, there's no self-serving reason for it. And like if you look, and the other thing is like you kind of see is like not only do they hate like just the image of the good, for non-self-serving reasons, it's like they hate the innocent too. You see what they're doing with kids, and like like literally they got gay marriage done the next day. They're saying 5-year-olds need to be allowed to cut their dick off or you're a bigot, and like the next day. As like, and for like, and I'm old enough to remember I was born in 92 and I was precocious and very self-aware very early on. And I'm old enough to remember kind of laughing at those old fuddy-duddies, that in the evangelical churches I grew up in that said, oh, gay marriage is a Trojan horse for pedophilia. And I thought, come on, come on. And it turns out dead right. Like not like they were kind of right, dead right completely. And like they were tuned into something that something that was truly true. They had a pattern. They saw the pattern before it manifested because they were tapped into something that was true, and they were saying, hey, these people are demons. They're either like they're possessed or something. Because now we're at the point where we're seeing stories about parents saying, oh, my son said he was a girl, so now I'm going to take him to the doctor and we're going to cut his balls off. And that's completely normal. Like it's not just like that happens.
if you
It
say
is
anything against it
normal.
on social media, you get kicked off. But
Yeah,
I
you
I
get.
can go back I can go back even further. I remember when Reagan got elected the first time, and he let the moral majority into the White House. So this Christian group is coming in there and they're like, well, 7 years ago, the government said it was okay to basically murder your kids in the womb. We're headed down a path. And I remember back then thinking this is it's kind of insane and everything like that. I mean, I don't know. Why did you let, separation of church and state? Why are you letting, I mean, I knew this as a teenager. Why are you letting these people into, well, they were there warning what was coming. I mean, they were right.
Yeah,
I hate to say that the moral majority was right because a lot of those people turned out to be, the worst kind of hypocrites, but that's fine. But they were right.
yeah, there's something there. And it's like and like the point that I cannot get my head around it is the fact that this is not a self-serving human evil. Because like even my archotropism framework is all assumes that this is all self-serving and
Right.
that there's a real positive incentive to like this kind of evil. So it's like this is something that I have no praxeology for it. Yeah, there is no there's no like obvious, there's no rational kind of self-serving here. That even the archetropism framework that's all about the elites and power and sociopathy can explain. And so that's like we're do that, and that kind of just says to me we're dealing with not this the actions we're seeing right here. These are not human actions. That's what that says to me, is that it's technically humans that doing the actions, but not for human reasons. And that tells me that okay, so maybe this is not really humans doing the actions. That's what that says to me, because humans act using means using means and time to achieve ends. This axiom of human action does not hold true when you look at like the gay, like the pedophile and the pedophiles in drag queen story time and cutting kids' balls off and blowing people up in Ukraine for what reason? It's like starting risking World War III, with a nuclear superpower for what reason? It's like I mean, and you're and like destroying your own financial income to do so. It's like,
Yeah.
where's the human reason for this? I mean, this is why I say, okay, I would lump these in with as evidence for against the human action axiom. It's like, okay, we're not dealing with humans. I mean, that's the logical conclusion here.
Well, I'm going to pick this up on my show because Rachel Tobias and I are going to talk tomorrow, and we are going to talk about this. And I think she's a really interesting person to talk about this with, considering she used to run like an atheist humanist group
Oh yeah,
organization, and she's asking questions about this. And so I think that
this is a good place
that'll be
to
this
pick
would
up.
be a good place to cut. Yeah. Plus, I gotta go to sleep, and the edible kicked in.
Oh, great. All right. Well, that's perfect. Right at hour 31. Perfect. All right, man.
All right, I
Got anything to
appreciate it, man.
plug?
Quinones show, my Substack, quinones.substack.com. Check out the latest episodes, episode 737 with Thomas 777, talking about Winston Churchill's rise in the 30s, going up to World War II.
All right. Take care, y'all.